J. Cole has some of the best soulful production in the rap game right now, and his latest album, The Off Season, is a great example of how he uses vintage samples to create anthemic rap songs. And the way that he does this is by combining high energy vintage soul samples with modern drums and production. So today I'm going to go in and break down how you can make your own vintage soul samples and how you can flip them into a modern slapper like J. Cole. Let's start by creating our vintage sample. This is what our finished sample will sound like. So it's sounding pretty crazy. Let's break down how I did that. One of the best instruments that you can start soulful samples off with is an organ. So I went into the Elements of Soul Analog Lab Bank and I grabbed this organ preset. Then I laid down a super simple chord progression, which is just C minor to G minor. And then for the second half of the pattern right here, I just took these notes from the chords and put them up an octave just to give it some more variation. Now to add some more flavor to that organ pattern, I grabbed another organ from the Analog Lab Bank and I freestyled this top melody on my MIDI keyboard. Another sound that you can hear in a lot of these vintage soul samples is an electric piano. So I went back into the Elements of Soul Analog Lab Bank and I grabbed this Wurlitzer preset. I copied the same chords from the organ to thicken it up, and this is what we get. And the reason that I added some more rhythm with that was just to contrast the long chords of the organ with some more stabby and more groovy chords, which just gives the sample some more movement and feeling. Now that we've got a nice foundation, I want to build some more supporting melodies that give it more impact and power that help give it that anthemic off-season kind of sound. And a great instrument to do this with is brass. Trumpets, trombone, saxophone. So I grabbed this sax ensemble brass preset from the Analog Lab Bank, and then I copied the bass notes of the chords and then put one transition note in between. So this is what that sounds like. So it's a subtle change, but let's add in some more brass and we're really gonna get somewhere. So I grabbed some brass one-shots from the Elements of Soul kit, and all I've done is copied that same MIDI pattern, but just with audio one-shots onto these trombone one-shots, and these are just gonna help give it even more power. So as you can tell, we're starting to get a little bit more feeling. But let's add a couple accent trumpets, and then we're really gonna get that high energy anthemic kind of feeling. So I grabbed two of these trumpet stab one-shots from Elements of Soul, and they sound like this. And you can just tell that sounds crazy. All real trumpet too. And then for that second chord, since we went down 5, I pitched these one-shots down 5. Repeated that for the second half, and then on this last part, instead of going up 5, I went up 7, so it's an octave higher, and then I chopped this last note right here, pitched it differently so it would be a transition note into the next part of the loop. Now to keep this evolving and interesting, I added even more brass one-shots, and these are honestly my favorite sounds in this whole loop. So I grabbed these fall-off one-shots from the Elements of Soul kit, and they sound like this. Instantly give this so much more like power and life. When you hear this all come together, it's gonna sound crazy, but we still got a couple more sounds to break down. Most vintage samples have a live bass line, so the next thing I wanted to do to fill out this sample even more was add a fake live bass line. So I grabbed this preset from the Elements of Soul Analog Lab Bank, and I laid down this pattern. And then for a second half, to make this sample evolve and continue to be more interesting, I changed up the bass line and added a lot more groove and accent notes in it. Doing this is a great way to just make your sample subtly evolve and feel like it's kind of changing throughout. Now, the last thing that I wanted to do was just accent this more with some guitars, drums, textures to really fill the sample out and give it that authentic vintage feeling. So you could probably guess it. I went into the Analog Lab Bank and I grabbed these guitar accent presets that I made for Elements of Soul, and this is what those sound like. Now, as far as the music goes, all I needed to do is add a drum break and some textures to finish this one off. So I dragged in this drum break and these textures from Elements of Soul, and this is what we get. And that first section is cool, but if you listen, the second section of the drum break changes up, and this is why I changed up the rhythm of things in the second part of the soul sample, which I'll get into in a second. So like I said, I changed up the rhythm on a couple of the sounds for the second section because the drum break rhythm changed. In the first section, the drum break is a little bit more crazy and it's got more going on. So for the music, I kept it more simple. Then when the drum break got more simple on the second section, I let the bass do that crazier pattern that I showed you. And then I brought in those more groovy and stabby chords that weren't in the first section. So the super underrated tip that you can use, especially for these authentic vintage samples, is to follow the rhythm of a drum break and change it up throughout the song. Now we've got the music completely finished, and this is what that sounds like. So that's sounding super cool, but a key element to those vintage soulful samples that J. Cole loves so much are having some crazy soulful vocals. So I sent this idea over to my vocalist, Paula, and she came back with some insane vocals. So that's sounding nuts. But to finish this off, I'm gonna bounce everything into one audio file and then we're gonna pitch and speed it up. So we've got everything in one audio file right now, and I pitch it up 2 semitones. Now I'm just gonna bring it up to like 145 BPM, and let's hear how that sounds. Super fire. But to take it to that next level, to get that authentic sound, I'm gonna add some saturation to the master of this sample to give it more of that sampled feeling. So I'm gonna go in right here and grab this UAD tape recorder, and I just put on this blues jam preset. And then after that, I boosted the low end a little bit because I felt like the bass was a little bit lacking. I wanted it to be more prominent. And then I also took down some high end, because when you pitch stuff up in audio, the high end can get kind of piercing. So I just wanted to take that down a little bit. And this is what our finished sample sounds like. Now let's flip this into a crazy J. Cole style beat. But before that, if you haven't caught on already, I made this loop only using sounds from the Elements of Soul kit, which is dropping super soon. But if you want the completely free version of this, you can download that in the description down below, and it's gonna have some of the demo sounds that you can try out. But I've been working on this kit for over 6 months now, and I cannot wait to drop it. So make sure to stay on the lookout for that and download the free version right now. If you listen to a lot of the beats on the off season, they've got nice 808s, but they aren't the crazy hitting spins 808s. You want something that's still hitting, but it's a little bit more drawn back. So I grabbed this 808 from the Elements of Soul kit because it's kind of unique. It's not hitting too hard, and I think it'll fit nicely within the sample. And the next thing I'm gonna do is just go into this bass MIDI section of the Elements of Soul and just drag in this bass MIDI for our loop. And now I've already got the MIDI pattern for the 808, so super easy. Like that. If you listen to the drum sounds on the off season, it seems like J. Cole's gravitating more towards those trappy kind of hi-hats. So I'm just gonna go through the hi-hats real quick in Elements of Soul. I feel like this one will fit. The first thing I like to do when I'm making a hi-hat pattern is just 2-step. And then this is just gonna get us a nice bounce going. Now I'm gonna go in and add some rolls. Like, this would be cool. Just keep it nice and simple, but add a couple rolls to give it some flavor. And then as I added that hi-hat in, I can hear that the sample and the high end of the hi-hat are kind of clashing. So I'm gonna go into here, and then I'm gonna go into the Elements of Soul RC20 bank, and I love this preset right here. I'm just gonna put this before adding drums. Much more space. But if you want the sample to come through a little bit more, you can drag this magnitude down, which is pretty much just the mix. Yeah, now let's add a snare. Ooh, I like that one right there. And I'm gonna also try out this one right here. Now this sound just gives it like, I don't know, some kind of cool effect sound. I'll add this in too, a little bongo. Dragging a kick. This one's clean. Just copy that over, make it a pretty basic pattern. Then there's one more sound I love in this kit. I'm just going right here to the percussion and grab this scratch sound right here. Put this at the end of every 8-bar pattern, trust me. Now, one other idea I've got to kind of liven this up for a different section is I'm gonna go into the drum breaks right here, and I'm gonna grab this All That Matters, and this is like a live hi-hat loop. And if you layer this in with those modern drums, it gives it like an old school, modern kind of hybrid, and it sounds super good together. And then one more thing I'm gonna do to just make this drop a little bit harder is go into the drum fill folder in Elements of Soul. Oh yeah, I love that one. And this is what our finished J. Cole off-season type beat sounds like. Like the sounds that I use in that beat and that melody, make sure to check out the free version of Elements of Soul. And if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the SoniX channel so we can keep dropping videos for you guys. That's it for this one.